Hi everybody, today we are going to be making this necklace front using a technique called bead embroidery, which some of you have been asking for on this channel, and I'm very excited to be able to finally do it. We will be using some materials from Beebeecraft, and I will put links for those down below. And I'd like to also mention there is a coupon code you can use, which is Jules, Jules 10, the number 10, and you will get 10% off your order at Beebecraft. So if you want to order, for example, the cabochons, you could order that set or the little star charms and you get 10% off with that code Jules10. Okay, let's dive into today's video. Today's video is going to be a little bit different. So we are going to be making a space themed necklace using these materials from Beebecraft that I have shown you in a previous video. I will link all of these items down below for you. So if you recall, we had this set of cabochons, and I have picked out 5 that I like and kind of laid them out the way I want them to probably sit. So the largest one, I've forgotten the measurements of these, is 25 millimeters. I think this is 20 and 18, I believe. Yes, so 25, 20, and 18. And I picked these ones. There are more that come in the pack, but I wanted some color variations and some pattern variations. I'm kind of almost wondering if that might be better. Yeah, I think I do like that one better. So they're all different looking. So we want this to look like planets. And then we have all of these little sparkling rhinestones in settings, little Montes, 3 different sizes that I'm going to sprinkle around, as well as the little stars. And we also have these moon charms that I think I'm going to use to make a chain for the rest of the necklace. And then I have these seed beads. There is also this chain with stars on it, which I am considering maybe hanging some of it along the bottom of the piece. Anyway, so for this project, because these are quite chunky cabochons, I am going to do bead embroidery. And I know some of you have been asking for that on this channel, and it is not something that I am by any means an expert at, but I have done a little bit of it. So I'm going to share kind of how I do it. So the material that I use, now obviously a lot of people like to use lacy stiff stuff or Ultrasuede for the base, but I like to use felt. And felt comes in different thicknesses. This one is actually a little bit thicker than I would normally want, but it was the only one they had in the store. This size here is more similar to the size that I would normally use, which is a thinner one. But it doesn't matter that much. And the reason I like to use felt, there's several reasons. Number 1, it's cheap. And number 2, it's very forgiving. So you can poke as many holes in this as you want to, and it's not really going to get angry at you. And then what I do is I then put Ultrasuede on the back. Once I am done, you just will glue the Ultrasuede on, and then you can edge it. And that way all of your little threads that you've sewn all over the whole thing on the back will be covered up. So it's really very simple to do bead embroidery, and you can get some really great results with it. So what I am planning to do is kind of make a curved shape of necklace. And I have been experimenting with kind of placing some of the stars and things, but the whole thing will be covered with these Toho seed beads, which also came from Beebecraft. amongst all the other things. So the very first thing we have to do is figure out our layout, and then I am going to glue these cabochons down using some E6000 glue. So that is step one. So let's just go over our layout here. And what I'm going to do, I'm not going to cut the shape yet. I'm going to glue my cabochons down, and then I will cut the shape. Because I kind of want to cut later, you know, I want to glue first, and then I can kind of trim it up the way I want it later. Okay, so I'm just, I am going to cut this felt down a little bit because it's quite a large piece, and I know I'm not going to need that much, so I will do that and I'll come back in a second. Okay, so I have cut just very roughly just a smaller piece, so I'm not having to work with such a large piece. And I am going to lay out how I want my cabochons. And I don't have to stick to a normal shape because I am doing bead embroidery, but I do need to think about what shape I want the actual necklace bit to be, and I don't want it to be that wide. I kind of want it to be narrowish. So thinking, do I want it to be, I have to decide if I want it to be symmetrical or I want it to be a little bit more random, like this, or I can even switch around the sizes a little. So no, I think I'm going to stick with it being fairly symmetrical. I mean, it may not be perfect, but I think I am. And I also I'm going to be putting in some little stars like this all around, all different. I was thinking of maybe on one of them doing an entire ring of these little ones, kind of like a Saturn's ring or something like that. And then this will, yeah, hang off. And then if I want to add the chain on, I can do that at the end. Anyway, so what I need to do is I'm just going to grab my E6000, and I'm using a new tube because my old tube was all dried out. So I'm going to glue these down, and I'm going to let those dry overnight, and I will come back again tomorrow and we will begin stitching the stitching part of it. Okay, so I will see you guys very shortly. Hello. Okay, so my cabochons are now glued and dried. I have waited 24 hours. Now, one of them may pop off if you're working, you know, in other areas and you don't, that's okay. You can just glue it back down again, okay? So don't stress out if one pops off before you get a chance to bezel it. So the first thing you're going to want to do is I like to work out how many beads I'm going to need to go around my cabochon. And remember, it has to be an even number if we're going to do peyote stitch, because you need one up, one down, one up, one down. So you want an even number of beads, and what you want is you want less rather than more. So this is 50 beads for my 25 millimeter, and I'm using, don't forget, I am using Toho, so they're slightly larger than Miyuki beads. You may be using delicate beads, so whatever size and all cabochons aren't necessarily exactly the same size either, so whatever cabochon you're working on at the time, it doesn't matter what shape it is, what size it is, you're going to need to measure and figure out how many you need for your cabochon with your beads, okay? Anyway, so I have kind of measured, and you can see, like, maybe I could fit in a couple more, but then this starts to come out. So I would rather have a little bit of space in between these beads, so that when I do the next layer of my peyote stitch, that you know, it's not too crammed, because what's going to happen is it's going to move up and down a little bit. And so you want a little bit less rather than a little bit too many, okay? So for my 25 millimeter stone here, I've worked out that I need 50. I've already measured this one and I needed 42. So let me work out, and that was a 20 millimeter stone. So that one has 42. And all I do is I just do a ring and sew through the very first bead again. So I haven't tied any knots or anything because I'm not gonna leave it like this. I'm just really measuring at this point. And let me work out how many I'm gonna need for this little guy here. So let's see how 40 looks. So 40 is a little too big. You can see how there is a gap right here. That means that it's too many. So I'm gonna take 2 more off. And this is 38. Okay, so 38 is perfect for that little one. Let's check this one as well. Yeah, 38. Okay, so I know from my 18 millimeters, I need 38. I need 42 for these, and I need 50 for this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to begin sewing them down, and I will show you that process. Okay, so I'm going to start working on my biggest stone first. So I have just some Fireline. I'm just using Fireline, and I am going to just come through from the back to the front. Right next to where my stone is, okay? And just pull through, and I'm just gonna leave a tail. I'm not even gonna tie a knot at this point, because I'm gonna add my first 2 beads on. So I'm gonna pick up my first 2 beads, and I know I need 50 beads for this, okay? So I'm coming up here, and I'm gonna look at where I roughly need to go down about right here. So I'm just going to go down right next to where my stone is. I'm going straight down. Make sure your needle is straight up and down. Okay. And my first 2 beads are on. Now you see how they've kind of gone a little bit tilted? We're going to fix that in just 1 second. So what I can do here, because I've come up next to where I went down, is now I can just tie a knot. And I like to just leave a little bit of a longer end that I can cut off, because you don't need to sew this in because it is a knot. So I'm going to leave a longer end just to show where my knot is, and then I will cut it later on, okay? Okay, so once you have your knot tied, you can go back up next to your very first bead that you added and just kind of try and poke your way up. So this is a little bit of guesswork here. If you've ever done embroidery, this is a similar idea to regular embroidery. It's just that we are adding beads on the front. Okay, so I've come up next to my very first bead first 2 beads that I added on. So I'm going to go through those 2 beads now, because remember, I want to straighten them out, okay? Remember how they were sitting at a catty corner? Oh. All right, now I'm going to pick up 2 more, and this is how I'm going to know that I'm doing even number, okay? And I'm going to, if you don't know how far you need to go down, you can measure, but I know it's going to be roughly here. And I'm going to go straight down with my needle, okay? And I'm going to pull that tight. Okay, so here are my next 2 beads added on. And then I'm going to try and come up 3 beads back. Don't worry about that very first bead. He's not going to sit even until we get all the way back around. So I've come up roughly three beads back, and I'm going to move forward again. And this is what's going to keep them all nice and straight on here, okay? So again, I'm just going to pick up 2 beads. And I know roughly I have to go down about right here because I know how far 2 beads is. I'm just going to go straight down through the fabric right next to where my stone is. Now, if you get too close in, this is what's going to happen. It's going to not sit nicely. See how that is too close? So I need to go a little bit further back. So all I need to do is I just unthreaded my needle. I can just pull that out from the back, just pull on the beads on the front, and rethread my needle. And I will try again, and I will go slightly further away than I did before. So if your beads are not sitting straight, like that means that you were too close, okay? Okay, so I'm going to go down right there. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Now, they may not sit perfectly, but once we go back and do our peyote, everything was going to even out. So I'm going back 3 beads. I like to go back 3 so that I'm not just doing pairs the whole way around. I want to kind of connect all the pairs together. That's why I go back 3. Some people will tell you just to go back 2. I like to go back 3. So okay, so now this is, I have my little line going. So I'm just going to repeat this process all the way around this bead. This cabochon. One more thing I forgot to say. You can also push your beads down into place. And this is probably better if you're a beginner and you don't want to eyeball it. So I've pushed my beads down. These 2 are not connected yet. And just press them back with your needle and then just stab straight down, and that is how you can get the perfect spacing on your beads. And then you still have to kind of guesstimate where to come back up again, but anyway, it goes pretty quickly once you get going. And one thing with felt is it does sometimes get hairy, so you just have to be careful to keep your needle up off the fabric and not start digging into the fabric. So I kind of bend my fabric a little bit. But anyway, I will continue on and I'll be back in a minute. Okay, so I have currently 46 beads sewn on, and I just want to make sure that 50 is going to fit. So I am taking 4 and I'm just checking my space here, and yes, it's going to fit perfectly with 50. So I've done, that means my spacing has been good all the way around. So I'm pleased with that. So I just have to finish doing these 2 loads. So I'm just going to stab about halfway down in the gap here. So that's now 48. And then I will put my last 2 on. I do keep getting, you have to be careful not to get your thread caught under here and pop your stone off by accident when you're sewing, if you have more than 1 stone glued down. Okay, so here are my last 2, whoops. So I'm just going to stab down right next to that first bead there. And then I'm going to come back up here. And I'm going to sew through 4 beads. So I'm going through the 3 plus the first bead. And then all of my beads are sewn on all the way around. So that is our foundation layer. So next we are going to do a layer of peyote off of these beads. So we're just going to pick up a bead, skip a bead, pick up a bead. So this is your kind of normal stitching. Bead embroidery, to me, it's actually easier than bead weaving is. So, you know, to each their own, but for me, I feel like this is easier. So I've picked up one of my Toho beads, I'm skipping the next bead, and I'm going into the very next bead. And I'm just going to do that all the way around. So by the time I finish, because I have 50 beads on the bottom, I will have 25 on a second layer. So the bead is just going to sit next to the bead where it is. So you just skip the next bead, so into the next bead, just like you normally would. So we're just making our layer of peyote stitch, okay? So I'm just going to continue this all the way around. Don't worry if it's a little bit lopsided looking at this point, because this is just our very first layer. It will smooth itself out as we go. And I'm using rounds, I'm not using delicas. So it's also good, and they're Toho, so they're not necessarily evenly sized either. So anyway, I'm just going to keep going around until I get that layer finished. Okay, so I'm about to add my last one, and you can see some of these, sometimes they want to sit out. That's okay. It's so I'm coming out this one, skip the next one, and go into the next bottom one. And that will be the first layer of peyote completed. And don't worry if your beads are, you know, sitting a little weird. And then you're just going to step up just like you would in normal. So I'm coming out this lower bead here. I'm going to step up into the bead above on the next bead here. And because these are very highly domed, I am going to do another layer of 11 O's, just regular peyote stitch. So this time I am just picking up one bead, coming out this upper bead, I'm going into the next upper bead. And this is going to help pull all of these in a little bit more and build upwards. And depending on what your stone is like, you may even want to do another layer, and then you're going to want to do a couple layer of 15 O's to pull in a little bit more. Now what I'm probably going to do is try to kind of color match my 15 O's to the stone. You could also make it completely different. You could do red around it if you wanted it to look like the planet was like on fire or something. You know, you can choose your colors accordingly. So anyway, I'm going to do this next layer and then I'll be back. Okay, so I'm about to finish my second layer, and you can see how that's pulled all of these in. And I feel like I'm going to need to start doing some 15 O's now, because I don't think it's going to pull in anymore with another layer of 11s. But do remember, when you are building up your bezel, that you are going to need to come inward at some point. So here I'm just picking up my very last one. I'm going into the one that I would go in, and then I'm stepping up through the next bead. Okay, you always have to step up on that last yeah, so I need to continue to pull in, because I want this to be slightly covered so that it will not, if the glue gives out, the glue is not going to be holding this on. It's just holding it in place for me while I'm working. I want the beads to be holding it onto the fabric for me. One thing you need to remember is, if you are going to be bead embroidering around all the outside here, this first layer isn't even going to be seen. It's going to be completely level with the rest of the beads. So you can build up a little bit further, but I mean, obviously you don't want to cover your beautiful stone either. So you're going to have to find a balance according to what works for your stone. There's no exact recipe for that. So I'm going to grab some 15 O's, and I'm just going to continue on adding 15 O's, and I'll probably do 2 rounds of 15 O's so that the whole thing is covered in 15 O's. And I will come back once I have done that. Okay, so what I did here is I picked out a few different colors of 15-0s, and I went ahead and just whatever color was going to be underneath where the 15-0 was, I kind of tried to pick a color as close as possible to that. I'm going to do one more layer of 15-0s doing the same thing in order to continue pulling this inwards, and I'm just trying to get that bezel up over the stone. Okay, so this is my second layer of 15-0s, and you can see how pulling in different colors kind of, even though you're covering up the stone, it makes it a little bit, it just makes it nicer, and it doesn't feel like you're covering up as much of the stone. Now you can see that I still have gaps here because the Toho beads are so much bigger than the 15-0s. So I'm going to have to do another layer of 15-0s just to help even out these spaces here and get this a little bit better. And that should be my final layer, and then I can sew down through the beads into the back, and I can just tie a knot. So and then I'll be able to trim these off at the end, but I'm just gonna wait for that. And then I will repeat the process on the other stones, and then I will come back to you guys once I have done all of that. Okay, so as you can see, I have now bezeled all 5 of my planets here, and I actually ended up doing 4 rows of 15-0s, just because otherwise it looked a bit gappy and I needed to go a little further up to get them close enough together. So I just finished this one, and I'm just going to show you how to tie off your thread. So this thread is short, so I'm just going to tie a knot. So all I do is I made my way down through the peyote and poked through to the bottom, and then I am just going to pick up a little bit of the fabric, and it's kind of like what we do normally. So here's our loop that the thread has formed. Okay, so I haven't pulled it all the way through, I've just formed a little thread, a little loop, and I am just going to put my needle through it and twist it a couple times. So it's twisted, the thread is twisted around the needle, okay? And then I can just pull tight, and that will form a little knot. I've actually got a little loop, and then I just sew a little bit away from where the knot is, and then I can cut it off. Now, when we finish the whole back will be glued down anyway, so you don't really need to worry about things coming out. Any long threads that I had, I left on because I can use them on the front. All the short ones I have just cut right down. Oh, this was my starter. So I just cut it and leave a couple millimeters. I'll try and show you there. So yeah, I don't cut it right next to the knot. I leave a little amount like that, okay? But like I say, once we glued on the backing, everything will be held in anyway. So the longer threads that I had left, I left on in case I need to use them for the front. So you can also see here how nice the effect is of using the different colored 15-0s to kind of match your stone. Here I didn't have a kind of brownish russet. Well, I had one, but it was too dark. So I went ahead and put gold on there. And you'll see here, my lines are twisting a little bit. So what you can do is you can go around with your nail and push them all back into alignment. And another thing that helps is when you're working each round, reverse, like run your thumb over it, reverse direction as you're going, and that will keep it so it doesn't sort of spiral as much, and it helps keep the rows a little bit straighter. But if you hadn't done that when you were working, you can go back later with your thumbnail and just line them up like little soldiers, so that the spacing looks a little bit nicer. Okay. All right, so the next step will be to sew on my gemstones and so forth. Now, some people do like to draw out their design beforehand, cut their shape beforehand. I am more of a, let's just go with it. So I did not measure these out. I just eyeballed where I wanted them to go. If you want to measure and mark everything up, you can. What I'm going to do is I am going to sew on my stars, these ones where I want them to go. And then I'm going to start filling in with my seed beads. And then once I sort of think, oh yeah, that's a nice shape, then I will plan to cut it the way I want it to be. So these stars I'm going to put on top of the layer of 11 O's, because otherwise I'm going to have to fill in the hole, and one bead is not really enough to do that. So I'm going to put them on top of my layer of 11 O's, and I will show you how. Obviously these are easy to sew on. You can just hold them in place, put your needle up, go down the back. You just sew it on like you would any fabric. And I'll show you how I like to do the seed beads. There's really two ways you can do it. You can either do it in rows, kind of like what we did for our foundation row, or you can do a sort of scattergun, random look, which I prefer. So I need to decide on this piece whether I want to do rows and have space be more shaped, or if I just want to do the random. And I'm probably going to do the random because it's just a look that I prefer. So when I'm doing that, I will show you how I do that. But in the meantime, I will sew these guys down in a pattern, and then I will come back to you. I don't think you need me to show you how to sew on some some Montes, hopefully. Okay, I'll see you guys again in a minute. Okay, so as you can see, I have sewn on some of those Montes, and you know, my back is starting to get a little bit messier, but that's okay because remember, it will be covered. So don't worry about if you have to kind of jump longer distances to get to things. I left this strand because it was still quite long, and I'm using this one. So now we're going to start filling in with the seed beads. Now, if you're using a new thread, you would just start the same way we did with our foundation row. You would pick up 2, go back down and tie the 2 ends together, and then you can continue on working. So I'm going to show you how I like to do my random shapes, okay? And oh, one more thing, when you are sewing on your Montes, make sure that you sew one direction first and go down through the fabric and then sew the other. So make sure you're sewing in a cross shape to keep them from flipping around. So make sure you're sewing both directions, and you will need to be careful as you're working that you're not going to get your thread caught on any of the prongs. That can sometimes happen. Okay, so I'm going to come up to the front. I'll just come up next to this Monte, and I'm just going to pick up 3 beads, and I'm just going to aim over here maybe. And you don't have to pick up 3, you can pick up any number you want. And then I am going to come up from here and go into that middle bead. So I'm coming out from the middle bead, and then I'm going to pick up maybe 2, and I'm going to head off in this direction over here. And then maybe I will come up over here. And I'm going to come out this front bead here. And I'm going to pick up maybe 3 again. And I'm just going to aim over here now. So we're going to, and what you can do again is push them down, see what it looks like. Like, okay, that'll work. And then just pop down at the end of your row. And then I'm going to come up through the second bead here. And pick up 2, and then I'm going to aim straight over towards this cabochon. And in this way, I'm just filling things in randomly. I'm just kind of branching here, there, and everywhere. And if I want to, if I have a little hole right here, for example, I can come up and just add 1 bead right here to fill in this little hole. So what you want is you just want all the beads kind of going in different directions and not in lines if you're doing this way. If you want to do lines, you can do lines, which is the way we were doing it when we went around our cabochons. So I don't know why this guy does not want to sit straight. Okay, there we, nope. He's being fussy. Okay. Anyway, so now I'm just going to continue filling in like this, all the spaces and kind of figuring out my shape that I want to have. And then I will go back and I will sew on top these stars where I want them to be. And then I will show you how to, once I have filled in the shape, I'll show you how to do the edging and connect it onto your piece. Okay, so I'll get that done and I'll be back in a while. Okay, so I'm just checking in. I've been working for about 10 minutes and you can see how much I've already filled in. I've decided that I'm going to just leave the outer planets, just enough room to do our outside on them. But I also wanted to show you, you can also, when you pick up a bead, so I'm coming out here, I can also sew into a bead kind of in a different place to help fill gaps like that. So you can, but it's a good idea to sew in and out from beads because that will kind of keep them lying flat and connect them to each other as well as to the fabric. So that's why I always come up and either go into or come out of a bead. You want to kind of keep the lines, but you can see how it starts to look quite random once you've, so some of them are going this way, some are going that way. I just like the way it looks. You know, it's instead of having lines of beads going, but I mean, that's personal preference. If you want lines, by all means, you could do a line around here and a line around there, you know, so however you want to do it. So this is probably going to take me a couple hours to fill all this in. Well, we'll see. Anyway, so I'll be back later. Okay, so it's taken me about 2 hours to fill in all these spaces. And I mean, you can see it's not perfect here. It's sticking out a little bit. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim and I'm going to leave a little space around. So I'm just going to cut my shape out and then I'll be able to cover up any edges and sort of smooth that out once I've done that. And then I will glue it using E6000 onto my Ultrasuede and cut that around as well and let that all dry. Okay, but before I do that, I will need to, I forgot about my my little stars, so I will need to sew those on before I glue down because I'll want the sewing from that. So you're going to want to finish all your edging as close as you can before you glue on your Ultrasuede. So that is like the last bit. because that's covering up all your threads on the back. And you can see it's, you know, it's a little bit messier than it was. So the backing will cover all of that and protect it as well. So first thing to do, cut it out. Then I'm going to fill in any little edges that need filling in with a few beads and sew on my stars, and then I will glue Ultrasuede, and then I will trim that as tight as I can, and then I'll come back and show you how to do the edging to connect the Ultrasuede and the edge of your fabric and just finish it off nicely. So I just cut the edging off, and you can see it's not perfect. It's a little bit bumpy and rough, but that is okay because once it's all finished on the edges, it's going to look good anyway. I forgot to say, you might want to try putting a different bead around the edge even. You could put some bugles or, you know, an accent bead around the edge to make it a little bit fancier before your finished edge. It's an option. I just wanted to share with you. Anyway, so don't worry if it's a little bit rough looking at this point, because once you get the edging on, it looks really nice. Okay, so here we are, all cut out with the stars sewn on, and oh, I stuck a little bit of thread right there. Oopsies. As you can see, I went ahead and ended up putting bugles around the edge because I kind of liked the look of the black against the more matted dark gray. I thought that was a nice touch. So you can see here it's not quite even, but that's okay because when we put our edging on, it will fix all of that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to glue, once I've sewn this in, I'm going to glue this onto my Ultrasuede. Now the other thing you need to think about at this point is how you're going to connect your chain, or maybe you're going to do a beaded chain, maybe you're going to connect something. Some people like to put a closed jump ring and actually entrap it between the backing and the main piece, which is an option. I am probably going to just use the beads, the edge beads, to connect. I haven't actually really decided on what the chain is going to look like yet. And I'm going to give you a little tip. So right now, because of the way I've been holding it, it has a nice gentle curve to it. I don't know if you, so that's flat, and then that's kind of a curve. And I want to keep that when I glue this on. So you can use a bust, and you can lay it on the bust and glue it on the bust like this so that it lays in a curved shape. And that way the backing will be curved to fit somebody's neck. So that is a good idea for comfort rather than having it be like this big straight flat thing. Okay. Anyway, so I'm gonna cut this out, not exactly to the shape. I'm just going to roughly cut a piece out and glue this on. And once I've done that, I will come back. It's gonna have to dry probably overnight. So I'll come back tomorrow and show you how to do the edging. Hi, it's the next day. So as you can see, I have been letting my glue dry overnight on my bust here. And get that out of the way. So now I'm just going to trim, and I may need to trim off a little bit of the felt as well. And once I have trimmed, I am going to show you how to do the edging, and then you'll basically be done. All you need to do then is connect whatever chain or maybe you're going to bead a chain, however you want to hang your piece. So let me trim this and then I'll be back. Okay, so as you can see, I have trimmed around my piece, and anywhere like here where I kind of didn't quite like the shape, I just trimmed it a little larger. I mean, this isn't perfect. This bit right here is not perfect. You know, there's a few bits that aren't perfect, but it's handmade. So, okay, I have some leftover thread that I left on from when I was sewing on my stars. If you don't, you can just sew through and tie a little knot and then begin from there. So we're going to put on our edging now. So what you're going to want to do is come through both your backing and the felt, and you're just going to come up at the edge. Okay, I'm just going to get my thread coming out the front. Okay, then you're going to pick up, we're basically doing brick stitch, but into fabric. Okay, so we're going to pick up 2 beads, and I'm just going to go down into both the felt and this suede, the ultra suede. And this is where having thinner felt is actually quite good. Okay, so there's my first 2 beads. Then I'm going to go back up. So where this is going into the fabric, I'm just going to come right back up and pull. Okay, and that is going to sit like that. And then I'm going to take my next bead. Again, I'm going to poke into the felt and the backing. And then I'm going to go back up from where I sewed into the bead. Okay, and these are going to just sit along the edge. Again, I'm just going to go through both the top and at the bottom. And you will find it starts to sit on its own in a little row. Can you see that? So you just continue doing this the whole way along. You can use also 8/0 beads, like, because this is so thick, I probably should have used 8/0s, but I'm just going to use the 11s. So you're going to do this. You can also, if you want, go back and add a little picot edge. Maybe some little gold beads would be cute. So yeah, this is all you do. You just kind of, and if your felt is a little bit under a bead, that's okay. You can kind of go in at an angle. Just get through both the pieces. I mean, it's not going to come apart. It's glued together. This is really just finishing off the edge so it looks nicer and cleaner, and closes up any gap, because you're probably not going to be putting your glue all the way to the edge. So yeah, you can see how that is starting to form a little row of beads along there, and these are maybe a little bit further apart than they could be, but it really gives it a cleaner look once you have finished that. So I'll come back when it's all finished and show it to you. Okay, I just wanted to show you now that I've done a little bit more so you can actually see what it looks like. So this is the beads here. I have to add a new thread here. So I just came out the bead that I had stopped at, and my old thread I just wove up and down through the beads that I have. But you can see here is the unfinished part, and here is the finished part, and it pulls the 2 sides together really nicely and just gives it a nice clean flat line. So these are pulled, these 2 pieces, instead of flapping about like this, are pulled together. And you can see I just have teeny tiny little stitches showing on the back. And that's all that will show on the back. So it's a really clean way to finish off your edge. So I'll just finish that and I'll be back. Okay, so that is now my necklace front all finished. And you can see how the edging has kind of smoothed out any rough areas that were not very even. It just visually ties it all together a little bit more. If you find that you have a large gap between a couple beads, I've already gone and tidied most of mine up. But see here, for example, it's a little further away. You can go in with your thread, go up and down until you get to those two beads, and then just go around them a couple times and it'll pull them in a little bit. But nobody's going to look at it that closely because they'll be looking at this beautiful area on the front. And this is quite heavy due to the weight of 5 cabochons, all these seed beads, and the thick felt. So I'm going to have to be very careful about the actual necklace part of it. So I am going to do that in another video. With a heavier necklace, you don't want a thin strap because it's going to dig into your neck. You want a thicker strap. So I'm going to have to think about that. And I have so many other videos lined up, and I've been working on this one for 3 days. So I am going to leave that one here. But you can use the beads to sew onto something, you know, the rest of your necklace. You could add chain, you could add a beaded thing, you could add beads, you know, actual beaded beads. You can even make another bit of embroidered, a little blob up here to kind of continue it up. So there are many, many options. You can even tie a ribbon, sew a ribbon onto it, and then tie that around your neck, which might be a good option for this. So anyway, I just hope you like this project. I think it's really cool, and I love how this has turned out. I'm quite pleased with that. And like I said, I'm not an expert in bead embroidery, but it's so easy. I hope you can, you know, give it a try. Felt is very inexpensive, and you really have nothing to lose, and you're going to discover that it's a lot of fun. So anyway, thanks for watching this very long video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care for now. Bye.